Hey guys, welcome back. And in this session, we'll talk about if then else statement in COBOL. So let's get started. A conditional statement is one that performs operations depending on the existence of some condition. In COBOL, such statements generally begin with the word if and are also called if then else or selection structure. The if-then-else structure permit us to execute one or more instruction depending on the content of the field. Now, the if-then-else statement is broadly categorized into two different categories. First one is if-then-else statement, that's a basic one, and the next one is nested if statements, where you have if-then-else structure, and within that structure you have multiple if conditions. Now let's talk about basic if-then-else statement. The if-then-else statement begins with the if keyword. After that you have a condition and thereafter you have the keyword then. So in the condition you specify your criteria and based on that particular criteria or condition the following imperative statements will be executed. And remember, else is an optional part, so in case if you want to execute certain statement that do not satisfy this condition, then probably you can include that in an else portion. That means all the statement that you have included in the else portion will only execute if your condition fails. Otherwise, the statement that you have included in the if portion will be executed. Now let me showcase an example so that you can understand how exactly you can use if then else statement in your COBOL program. In the following example, we have a condition that will either print the total debit transaction count or it will print the total credit transaction count, and it will depend on the transaction type. So if my record is having a transaction type as DR, then it will going to print the total debit transaction count. And in case if my transaction type is credit, then it will going to increment the credit counter and it will going to print the total credit transaction. Now let's talk about nested ifs structure. So the structure of basic if and nested if is almost same. The only difference is that in nested ifs you include additional if then else statements within the if or else portion of the condition as per your requirement. So in the following structure that I've showcased here in this slide, I've used additional if condition in the else portion. And if you want, you can include if condition in the first half. So that is totally depending on the project requirement or the program you're writing. Now, the important thing that you need to understand is that nested if conditions are the conditions where you have one if statement or else statement, and within that statement you include additional if statements, right? And there's no limit. You can keep on including if conditions as per your requirement. But it is always recommended that you should not go beyond 3 level deep. When I say 3 level deep, that means within a single if statement, you should not have more than 3 if-else statements because it will downgrade the performance of your program. Quickly walk you through the example of nested if statements and then you can easily understand how exactly you can group different conditions. So in the following example, we are using the similar if then else statement that we have seen in our previous example. And in this case, we are printing the total transaction count based on the transaction type. So the normal condition is that in case my transaction type is a debit, then I will increment the counter and I will print the total debit transaction count, right? In case if my transaction type is not debit and let's say it is credit, so again the else portion will come into picture, and in that case what I'm doing is I'm checking for the transaction type again in case my transaction type is credit and the transaction location is a specific country, that is US. So in that case I would be incrementing the US transaction count and then I'll be printing the total US credit transaction count in spool. In case if the location is not US, it is in some European region, right? So in that case, I would increment the European transaction credit counter, right? And then I'm going to print the total EU credit transaction count in spool. So this is how you can design your logic. And again, the way you design your logic, that depends on the project requirement and how exactly the program is written. So this is how you can use if then else statements to write your logic. You can also use evaluate statement that we're going to discuss in our next lecture probably. So in that case, you can use evaluate statement to implement the similar structure, and you can also use logical operators to combine conditions. For example, in this case, I've used AND operator to combine two different conditions, that is transaction type equals to credit and transaction location equals to US. So you can very well design your program logic in the similar fashion. So far, if you have any question, then do let me know. Otherwise, let's move on to our next lecture.